Apple just announced, rather quietly with a press release, the brand new iPad Generation 10. It's got a whole new look, whole new camera placement, and a lot of the same stuff that we've already seen before. That's weird. So why, with all its potential flaws, did I buy the cheapest one anyway? Let's find out. This is actually the iPad Air. This isn't the new iPad. Now, I know a part of any answer to that question will be, well, Gary, you make YouTube videos, you were gonna buy it anyway. But this time around, I really wasn't. You may have noticed, I've been making less videos recently, and in doing so, I don't really need to squeeze out every single content drop from literally everything Apple releases. I was originally going to skip the iPad because it seemed pretty meh, but after looking at a few key upgrades, I decided to purchase one because I legitimately think that it's gonna help me out. But first, if you didn't know, there was a new standard iPad because the fanfare was about as non-existent as you can get for a release. Let's quickly cover the specs and ordering options of this latest iteration. The iPad 10th generation comes in at a rather higher price of $449. For context, last year's iPad Gen 9 came in at $329. That's roughly a 27% price increase, so hopefully there is something behind the facade that makes that jump in price worth it. For that money, you'll get a redesigned 10.9-inch backlit multi-touch IPS panel that, in a weird turn of events, is not fully laminated. Now, we will talk more about that in a minute, but for the Apple uninitiated, fully laminated is when the display and the front glass panel are all one seamless piece. Non-laminated means they are two distinct things, and you will be able to see a difference between the layers. This display has a resolution of 2360 by 1640 pixels and can go up to a respectable 500 nits of brightness. Under the hood, you'll get the slightly older A14 Bionic processor and a new front-facing camera placement, which is probably the thing that I am most excited about. For storage, it's very similar to last year's offerings where you get 64 gigabytes at the base and 256 gigabytes at the top end, which, if this were a more quote-unquote pro model, I would be irritated, but with it being the lower end model, I understand their storage selection options, but the price is pushing it more towards a higher end model, and I wish for the money there was more storage. You see that what we did right there, that back and forth, that's been going through my mind since hearing about the iPad, because that's a significant price increase that actually makes that iPad more expensive than the iPad Air 4, and the iPad Air 4 has the same processor, better display, better accessory support, better a lot of things, but again, we will talk more about that here in a second. When it comes to buying the iPad and why I did it, it really boils down to two main updates. First off, the update to the physical design of the tablet itself. I love standard iPads. You can go back and see a whole host of videos on this channel of me gushing over Gen 7, 8, and 9, because for that money, you could not get a better productivity tool that's essentially a mobile office. I mean, right now, I use my Generation 8 almost every single day as my teleprompter for my camera. Seriously, I've had high-level meetings conducted on an iPad Gen 8 and 9. It might be my favorite piece of technology ever. But in our year 2022, the iPad was starting to look stale. I mean, in all honesty, it started to look stale like in 2019, but 2022, it was looking real old. And I get that you shouldn't just buy things because they look neat. It's all about what they do and not how they look doing it. But the iPad was such an old design that it was really starting to become a problem, and it looked just janky compared to some of these slicker, sleeker alternatives. So that they've given it a total faceover to make it look more like the iPad Air, that's a huge win in my book. Though I did buy the pink one for purposes of YouTube thumbnails, the silver is probably the best option for the professional crowd. Part of that updated design isn't just the looks, but it's how the updated smart connector works with the new standard iPad. If you don't know what I'm talking about, on the iPad Airs and the iPad Pros, Apple has included these little dots right here on the back. Now, they are pretty unassuming, but they allow for some seriously powerful accessories and add-ons, namely the Magic Keyboard, which, while expensive, is to this day one of the absolute best accessories that you can buy for any piece of technology. The standard iPads for the past few years have had their connectors on this side, so you were essentially limited to the kinds and styles of covers and keyboards that you could use. That Folio keyboard for the iPad standard it's fine to type on, but all of the folding and wriggling that you have to do for it, it's a huge pain in the butt. Like even this one for the iPad Air, like it doesn't do all that folding. It just sits. It's very stable by itself. I like this. But now that the standard iPad is of the more right-angled design, like the iPhones, MacBooks, everything Apple makes, I guess, the side smart connector starts to make a lot more sense. And now, in fact, you can get a version of the Magic Keyboard for the standard iPad. The new keyboard looks like one of those Logitech offerings compared to the original iPad Magic keyboard, but it does seem to have a decent laid out board, inverted T arrows, and a fairly large trackpad. I mean, that brings the ensemble together. I do just wish they had put the connector on the back though. I mean, if you're already redesigning the whole iPad from the ground up, why not just standardize all the accessories? Because if they had put the smart connector on the back, we might have just been able to use the older accessories we already have for other iPads. I just hate buying brand new proprietary accessories that will only work with that specific device. The second major update, and really the reason I purchased this tablet, they finally put the front-facing camera in an actually useful spot. On phones, it makes total sense that the front-facing camera is on top of the vertical side. My phone is in that orientation pretty much all of the time anyway, and it's in that orientation 100% of the time when I want to use that camera. But on tablets, while they may have started off as big phones and they took a lot of cues from those early offerings, anymore, my tablet is in landscape mode 95% of the time. I mean, a huge chunk of the time, it is in landscape mode. So if you have a tablet with a camera on top of the vertical, and you're gonna use this as a webcam or as a virtual collaboration tool, everything looks off. It's just a bad experience. And I've hosted hundreds of meetings on my iPad. Putting it on top of landscape means that it will look far more natural, and it's just an overall better placement of the camera. Thumbs up, Apple. I wish it hadn't taken you this long. Since you're doing this, I assume you'll be adding it to the Air and the Pros in the future. You could split the difference though, like Samsung does with the Tab series of tablets, where the face unlocking camera is still on the vertical top, but the video functionality camera is on the landscape top. I'm just saying. Apple won't, but they could. Not only does this camera placement make so much more sense, but they also included that, well, it's not brand new anymore, but their newish ultra-wide angle camera and their center stage feature. I probably won't be able to actually call this out anymore because it's just the way of things. It's not some cool new feature, but I really like it. Either way, this camera is super wide angle, and then the iPad keeps it centered on you or your group of people if more than one person is in the frame at a time. It's darn awesome. I use this a lot when we FaceTime with our family that lives out of state. And well, I guess how that really goes is our family uses it when they FaceTime with us because we're the ones that live out of state. Regardless, it's cool. Those two things are specifically the reason that I bought the new iPad, but it's kind of a weird device, and I want to include some reasons not to buy it at the same time because you can get 99% of what this does and more in another tablet that costs the same and or less. So the iPad Gen 10 does not work with Apple's Gen 2 Pencil? So many gens in there. That's strange because that pencil is a few years old at this point, and there are specifically tablets with way less powerful processors that work with the updated pencil. I believe the A12Z was the first processor to work on that. That is the A14. And in another real head scratcher, if you do want to use the Apple Pencil Gen 1, you have to buy a separate adapter to use it because the new iPad is USB-C, where the Apple Pencil 1 is charged via Lightning. That is a shockingly inelegant solution to this problem, coming from a company that is normally on point with elegant solutions to hardware problems. Like, it's so un-Apple for this to be what we have come up with. Also, that display is again not fully laminated, which that might actually be the reason why you have to use the first generation pencil. Now, if you are not a tech head and you don't stare at your screen with it pressed right to your face looking for the seam, you might not notice it. But it's not about noticing it for me. It's about why do this when you already have a 10.9 inch fully laminated panel made? Why fully redesign something that didn't need fully redesigned? And we already talked about it, but that smart connector on the side instead of it on the back is just another thing that I don't get. The keyboards and cases you have to use because of this are objectively worse than the ones that are magnetically attached to and have the connection on the back. These keyboards are all freestanding rigid models. Even this Folio keyboard is a freestanding rigid model, and you can turn your iPad into a hybrid mobile laptop device that is so good it should just have its own name. But the side connectors, whether they be from Apple, Logitech, or whomever, all have to have that lean back with a kickstand style, which only works on a desk or a table. You can't use it from a lap when sitting on a chair or couch or laying in bed. I actually do not like these style of keyboards because they're only useful in such limited places. You have to be fully sitting at a standard desk or table position for this to work, and I don't always want to do that with a tablet. Leading us into the price. The price of the iPad actually kind of concerns me. Not for the iPad itself. I think this will continue to be the lowest end of the iPad family, but because it's really close priced to the mid-range models now, and I feel that that 27% increase will be just spread across the line from here on out to smooth out the differences. $449 is not cheap, and that extra $120 over the iPad Gen 9 really makes the 10th gen sit in a weird spot. The point of buying the cheapest iPad has always been, well, at least for me, to get the most functionality out of what an iPad can be for the absolute least amount of money. But this is the first one that bucks that trend, because the iPad Air 4 can be purchased today for $429 from places like Amazon. The iPad Air 4, it has a fully laminated display, it works with the Apple Pencil Generation 2, has the smart connectors on the back, has the same processor as the 10th gen iPad. The only thing it's missing in my books is the side mounted camera and the ultra wide angle camera. It has a standard width camera, but in every other way, the iPad Air 4 is objectively better than the iPad Gen 10. So why buy the iPad Gen 10? Personally, I would like to have a few of those updates, so I think it makes sense for me. But if you just want the best bang for your buck tablet, absolutely I would push you towards the iPad Air 4. The Gen 10, just kind of in a weird place. And if you like this video and you want to see some cool accessories to buy for any of your iPads, click here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.